Bismillah, Assalamu alaikum. In today's video, I'll be refuting Orientalists on one of their main arguments against the Quran, or one of their most common arguments against the Quran. Supposedly, the contention is that Dhulqarnain is Alexander. Let's get started. So, here's the contention. The Quran is mentioning the figure of Zulkarnain as being a conqueror or a ruler with a vast empire. Zulkarnain literally means possessor of the two horns. Alexander was a major conqueror with a vast empire and he is associated with two horns. So it's most likely that Zulkarnain is Alexander. There is also a text on Alexander which is quite similar to the Zulkarnain passages in Surah Kahf. This is an error in the Quran because Zulkarnain is described to be monotheistic, but Alexander was a pagan. So there's a lot to get through here. Let's get started. Firstly, as a general point regarding any plagiarism claim made against the Quran, the Orientalist claim is that similarity equals plagiarism. That if Quran is similar to some text, Quran copied from that. But this is just an assumption. Similarity equaling plagiarism is just an assumption. It will always remain an assumption. It will not evolve into or magically turn into an argument. It will remain an assumption. Similar errors can prove plagiarism. Similar errors can be an argument for plagiarism, but similarity in and of itself does nothing to prove plagiarism. Now let's get started on the error claim made here. But before that, I would just like to point out the position I am defending here. The identity of Zulkarnain is unknown. I am not making any specific claims about who Zulkarnain is because there is no consensus or there is nothing approaching consensus among the Islamic scholars. There is no clear cut evidence about who is Zulkarnain. But I'm just refuting the Orientalist claim that Zulkarnain is Alexander. I'm refuting the argument for that in this video with three strong reasons. Firstly, the Orientalist claim for Zulkarnain being Alexander mainly depends upon the name Zulkarnain meaning the possessor of two horns and Alexander being associated with two horns. There is a major problem for this claim. Whenever the word Qarn or Qarnain is used in the Quran, it never means horns. Never. Not once. Now, if we are to look at what a particular word in the Quran means in a particular place, the best place to look for its meaning is other places in the Quran where this word is used. So, when we look there, the word Qarn or Qarnain never means horns. If that's the case, then the Orientalist claim about Zulkarnain being associated with horns does not work, hence the argument is dead. By the way, this is not something I'm making up. I linked the Corpus Quran website, the particular link where it shows that every time the word Qarn or Qarnain is used in the Quran, it refers to a group of people. It never refers to horns. Secondly, we have explicit reports from Hazrat Ali RA denying that Qarnain means horns. Why would he deny the literal plain reading of the text? I mean, think about this point. Hazrat Ali RA is denying the plain literal meaning of Qarnain, right? He is unlikely to do so by himself. It is extremely plausible he heard this from Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, that the Qarnain does not mean horns. It is extremely plausible that he heard this from Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. Now, someone can try to claim that Hazrat Ali RA was narrating an Israeliyat, which means the stories of Christians and Jews. But this claim does not work because there are three Sahaba who are known for narrating Israeliyat: Hazrat Abu Huraira radiallahu anhu, Hazrat Abdullah ibn Masud radiallahu anhu, and Hazrat Abdullah ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu. Hazrat Ali radiallahu anhu is not among them. He is not known for narrating Israeliyat. Only the three Sahaba radiallahu anhu I mentioned are known for narrating Israeliyat, so it is extremely unlikely Hazrat Ali RA is getting this information from Israeliyat. It is much more likely, though not certain, but still much more likely that Hazrat Ali radiallahu is getting this information from Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Basically, what Hazrat Ali radiallahu interpretation is, and there are multiple reports regarding this in Musannaf ibn Abi Shayba. I'll link the reference in the video description. Basically, what Hazrat Ali radiallahu said is that Dhulqarnain was hit on each side of his head, and this is why he is called Qarnain. It has nothing to do with horns. So we have extremely strong reasons from our historical tradition to think that Qarnain does not mean horns. Again, the Orientalist claim is still dead. Thirdly, and this is the most important part, the text that the Quran has supposedly plagiarized from the Alexander stuff, right, is dated to 630 CE. But Surah Kahf was revealed long before that. Surah Kahf was revealed before Hijrah, which took place in 622 CE. So, how could Surah the Quran have plagiarized something that did not exist at the time? I mean, the Orientalist claim is beyond desperate here. It doesn't work for these reasons. More than that, there's another important point I need to make here. The entire Orientalist narrative, in fact, almost each of their arguments assume that the basically ahadith and seerah of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu are not preserved, and that the Quran has been tampered with and is not preserved. Problem is, both of these assumptions are false. The seerah of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu and the ahadith are preserved. I've made numerous videos on this. There are numerous arguments for this. There is no way around hadith preservation, and the Quran preservation is proven even more strongly because of the numerous first century manuscripts. The only claim that Orientalists can try to make here is that Quran was tampered with. Problem is, structural coherence of the Quran disproves any tampering claims. In fact, there is massive structural and linguistic coherence present in Surah Kahf, which buries any tampering claim. So the Orientalist position is not has no leg to stand on. Now, firstly, I would like to argue why structural coherence proves preservation, or why, if there is tampering, uh, there wouldn't be structural coherence. Now, these are just 5 lines that I wrote, that I typed, and I'll just read them. I woke up in the morning, I ate breakfast, I went to work, then came back, I ate dinner, I went to sleep. Now, look at this. The first, I woke up in the morning, mirrors, I went to sleep at night. The second, I ate breakfast, mirrors the fourth, I ate dinner. And the middle of the is the main point of this passage. I went to work, then came back. Now, this is what the example of structural coherence is, and structural coherence like this, similar to this, or not even like this, different types of structural and linguistic coherence are present in the entire Quran, right? I want to just demonstrate how easy it is to how this structural coherence would not be present with just a little bit of tampering. Suppose I changed I ate breakfast to I took a shower. Would the structural coherence be present then? No, because the second line wouldn't mirror the fourth line. I took a shower would not mirror I ate dinner. Even just a change of two words breaks the structural coherence. There is structural coherence, keep that in mind. Even slight changes, even slight tampering, extremely slight tampering can break structural coherence. Now, as Quran is concerned, the Quran is highly structurally and linguistically coherent. This is something that is recognized by Muslim scholars and non-Muslim scholars. Orientalists even recognize this point. I'll give an example. Raymond Farron, I think he converted to Islam because of the structural coherence of the Quran. Another example is Michel Cupers, and there are many other scholars who will admit this point as well. It's actually quite easy to prove. If the Quran was tampered with, this amount of linguistic and structural coherence would not exist. Yet this structural coherence and linguistic coherence exists. Hence, Quran wasn't tampered with. This coherence is also present in Surah Kahf, so we can specifically prove this surah was not tampered with. By the way, the coherence in Surah Kahf, as in the rest of the Quran, is of two types. One of them is the type of structural coherence, like the Surah Baqarah one, that's quite famous, or the Surah Yusuf ones. And there's another type of linguistic coherence in which basically the entire surah has a coherent message where each section of the surah is building on that message. I'm linking the reference for the second type of structural literary coherence here, and I link for the references for the first type of coherence, structural coherence in Surah Kahf in the video description. Now I'll just read about Surah Kahf, the narrative and literary coherence of Surah Kahf. This is from a PhD thesis, I think, and I'll link that in the video description as well. In this chapter, it was demonstrated that the narrative of Dhulqarnain continued to develop the attributes related to God's self-image in Surah 18 as a personal narrative, the virtues of God as Al-Qadir, the All-Able, Al-Wali, the Protector, and Khairun Swab, and Wa Khairun Ukban, best of reward givers and punishers, are embedded within the story structurally and semantically and shape its theme. This narrative particularly connects the three attributes together in a single narrative. Thus, it reinforces the holistic superior image of God in the surah. The evaluative use of constructed dialogue, especially, plays a significant narrative role in manufacturing, in reinforcing a favorable image of God. As seen is in this chapter, the entire Surah Kahf. Actually, no, this chapter is the chapter of the thesis, not of Surah Kahf. As seen in this chapter, Zulkarnain's statements, which are essentially represent God's re-evaluation, are left alone without further evaluative commentary. The function of the narrative is highly evaluative, as with the previous narrative analyzed, and its evaluative style and contents are being used to build up a significant level of credibility or validation for the speaker before making his final point. Now, what was the point of reading all of this? All of this shows there is an extremely strong literary coherence in the surah. If the surah was tampered with, this literary coherence is highly unlikely to exist, and different sections of the surah would be extremely dissimilar to one another. If the Dhulqarnain story was added to the Quran, then this story would be dissimilar to the stories before it. Yet, as this thesis shows, this section of the Surah Kahf, the Dhulqarnain one, coheres with the rest of the surah. So the tampering claim is dead. Now I will link some examples of such structural coherence in the video description. But if the Quran is coherent, right? If the entire surah is coherent, then the tampering claim is dead, because this coherence would not be present in the case of tampering. In conclusion, inshallah, I hope you have seen that the Orientalist claim here is quite desperate and pathetic. The Zulkarnain being Alexander contention is actually refuted quite easily, and no claim about the tampering of the Quran works because of the massive structural and literary coherence of the Quran. Inshallah, I hope you have enjoyed this video. If you do, please like the video and share it, because this is an important contention and it is easily refuted. Inshallah, I'll keep refuting these clowns till next time. Assalamu alaikum.